Good afternoon and welcome to Lunchtime Series with me, Kevin Britz, leading the charge with insights, information, and ultimately effective results. If you haven't yet, please like and share to your favorite platform to keep our channel growing. Joining me in today's marketing and leadership segment, marketing communications expert and co-host Craig Page-Lee. How are you doing, Craig?
Everyone, I'm well, thank you. Yeah, can we believe it? Officially into the second half of 2025, and I know you like hearing facts and stats, so here's some useless info for you. In 74 days until Christmas Eve, and 25 episodes left for us this year before we go on our annual break.
Yeah, Craig, it's I was just thinking now when I saw this that I'm actually looking forward to Christmas. This year has been the state of the nation, the state of the world is yeah. I'm wishing this year over faster than usual, just because it's just shitty. So I'm like, okay, well, I'm looking forward to Christmas, so I can't wait.
Bring it up.
Craig, so in keeping with our regular conversation, please give us a bit of a feedback the feedback or summary of last week's conversation.
Yeah, Kevin, thanks. Yes, so we definitely had a great conversation last week. Reviewed a sort of a few fringe forces that I came across when expanding on the topic of consumer behavior in the first half of 2025, and their collectivist trends that I thought were highly relevant and worthy of the detailed conversation. So we picked up on four fringe trends which are noted as followed. First is longevity era and age-driven innovation. Fringe force 2 is hashtag no buy 2025, intentional pause, and we had some really great conversation around that. Fringe force 3 is sober, curious, and alcohol reassessment, also known as the sober curious movement. Fascinating topic, and we really got under the skin of that one. And then the fringe 4 was crowd shipping e-groceries, and yeah, we focused on the likes of the Checkers 6060 app in South Africa. So going back to the fringe force that we really did spend a bit more time on, that being fringe 3, sober curious and alcohol reassessment, and we came across 7 reasons or factors that were driving this particular trend in the younger generation, Kevin. Reason 1 is mental health over intoxication. Reason 2 is economic realities and value prioritization. Reason 3 was social rituals are evolving. Reason 4 is influencer culture promotes sobriety as aspirational. Really wonderful phrase that. Reason 5 is better booze-free alternatives. Reason 6 is greater awareness of alcohol's long-term harm. And reason 7 is identity-driven consumption. Yeah, this conversation definitely is worthy of a mention again, as it's incredibly important for any brands associated or at least brand association to clearly know what the drivers are and how to actually position themselves effectively to really partner in this group of Gen Z's lives and their rituals, Kevin.
Yeah, Craig, I thought it was a fascinating conversation, especially around the no buy for 2025, but also that sober curious kind of approach where this generation is just making different choices around alcohol.
Yes.
So it's fascinating, guys. If you haven't gone and seen it yet or haven't listened, go and check it out on your favorite podcast channel or to go and check it out on YouTube. Craig, so what are we discussing today?
Kevin, just in light of the theme of last week, attention is a key part of it. So I wanted to sort of stay close to that. And I came across a really compelling research report on McKinsey and Company. And the report is titled The Attention Equation, Winning the Right Battle for Consumers' Attention. The report was published as recently as the 13th of June this year and was led by Kabu Ahuja and Mark Broherson, and there were a number of at least co-authors that participated in the production and publishing of this report. And while it's definitely a significant read, filled with huge amount of insights and facts and stats, all supporting the development of this proposition known as the attention equation, I really only just want to give it a sort of a glib view with looking at some of the foundational definitions and classifications around various consumer segments and intention behaviors, importantly, attention behaviors covered throughout the report.
Again, I love this because The Future of Work is Human book speaks about attention and being able to manage your attention. So the fact that there's an attention equation, I think that's really going to give us some more insight to this. So tell us, what is this attention equation?
Yeah, Kevin, definitely. We've got to start with setting some great context here. And the authors believe that predominantly in the media business, these media businesses are missing the full story on consumer attention. And traditionally, media businesses, creators, marketers, and brands have been focusing primarily on the quality of time spent with a brand, or the flip side of that, actually the size of the audience. And in each instance, they overlook one of the most important issues, namely the quality of time. So moving from the quantity and reach into the quality of time. And the researchers in question here, Kevin, have developed what they call this attention equation, which defines, take note, consumers' attention as the product of focus and time. Attention equals focus times time. The equation emphasizes the valuable attention isn't just about the duration of engagement, but also the intensity of focus of that engagement. So really quite an important point to understand. And the research suggests that companies should actually now start prioritizing creating high intensity focused moments rather than just simply aiming for longer engagement and longer periods of engagement with consumers and audiences, Kevin. Does
Hey,
that resonate with you?
yeah, what's fascinating about that is there is a company, I should know this off by hand, but there's a company that actually does a study on flow, what the flow state is. And it speaks to the importance of how you focus your actual intention and focus your time on completing anything. And they have a bit of a strategy that they actually follow, and it ties closely into the focus versus time or times time. And it's really based on and really suggesting that you actually, because, and I know this sounds a bit out there, but because time is a construct, when you really tap into flow state, you manage to bend time based on the fact that you can actually get more done in a focused amount of intentional time that you focus on something. So it's
I
actually
like
really
that.
fascinating that they do this. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Important point to note about this equation, though, is that the statement allows us to understand that it's not all consumer attention is created equal. Consumption and monetization, and here's the important piece of this research is that it brings the monetization aspect into the equation, and consumption and monetization varies widely, Kevin, across 20 major mediums in the attention economy, and this different level of attention is the key reason for that variability. And the 20 major mediums in the attention economy are categorized across a range of media channels. And you'll understand this, the likes of digital, traditional, emerging, and most definitely interactive media formats. And that's really where capturing and holding the attention is important. And a summary of this reality is that in today's fragmented media landscape, the quality and depth of consumer attention differs significantly across platforms, impacting both how content is consumed and how effectively it can be monetized. The quality and depth of consumer attention refers to how focused and engaged and intentional, here's the word you're using, a person is when interacting with a piece of media content. It's not just about if someone sees something, but how much they process it, how much they remember it, and how much they act on. Intentionality coming through there quite clearly.
Yeah, and I think we're speaking around media and marketing at the moment, Craig. But I think this conversation around what the attention is it's applicable in all environments, right? And if
Absolutely.
an environment and the leader of that environment starts paying attention to how people are paying attention to and what they're paying attention to, they might actually get a whole set of different results.
So just sorry to that point, I really love that because that sets a perfect segue into a leadership series where, intention and intentional becomes a really key topic of conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. Craig, why are the likes of media businesses and brands getting it wrong?
Yeah, when I read this, it was really important. Spending so much time immersed in the space and creating content for brands, a really important question. And there's a lot of content in the report to answer this question, particularly in the opening chapter, which provides deep context to the media consumption behavior by consumers, Kevin. And I really want to review each of these two key paragraphs in more detail. The opening paragraph notes that the challenge of attracting and retaining consumer attention is a matter of supply and demand, and the sheer volume and diversity of content available to audiences greater than ever before. Absolutely it is. But the time that people have are willing to devote to consuming those various forms of media and content and entertainment, including the likes of video, audio, gaming, print, social engagement, and live events, is finite. And that, I think, is probably the most important point to understand here.
Yeah, Craig, so what is meant by the word finite in this instance?
It means that people obviously only have a limited amount of time and attention to spend on media each day. And we all know that there are many forms of content or platforms competing for our attention, the likes of our podcast series, videos, audio, gaming, social media, and the reemergence of participating in live events. but people's time is fixed. And the reality is there are only so many hours in a day, and consumers must very quickly choose where to focus their attention, which means that some of the formats will win more attention than others.
Yeah, and I think I think we can blame TikTok for this. Because
Probably.
short form video it's taking over the world to such a large degree, and brands are, I don't know if you've seen, but brands are tapping into the 10-second advert. Like
Yes.
they literally going, and I think it was solar panels or something, and they literally, in 10 seconds, they're making you watch something, they have something that's really quirky or really funny attached to this, and they go right to the product. It's fascinating, but it's literally 10, like maybe even 30 seconds, but it's not longer than that. Right. So I think being able to grab people's attention and really press upon, like, this is what we're selling. It's an interesting kind of tactic, but it's the world we live in currently.
And that's important for paragraph 2, because what we do note, Kevin, that's over the past decade, the total number of hours each day that consumers are watching, listening, or engaging with brands actually hasn't grown much, only by 1 to 2%. And at the same time, technological innovations in the likes of production and distribution of content is definitely on the rise, with user-generated content right at the front end of that. And then the proliferation of premium content creating just this wide spectrum of choices. And we also note that there are 50 times more amateur uploaders than professionals on Spotify, with 25,000 times more hours of content produced last year, Kevin, on YouTube alone than on any other traditional medium or television network or video streaming service. Now, with that amount of content and only 1 to 2% increase in time, there definitely is a big race on for brands to see who can attract and retain that attention.
And I think that speaks to some of the points you've made earlier in the previous conversations around niching down and really, really understanding your market, so that you're really speaking to them very specifically. Because
Yes.
it's almost like we're running out of time.
Yeah,
I,
good point. That
I
exactly
was at the
that.
workshop yesterday where the promotion of the conversation was, are you creating content yet? They had a whole workshop about it. And it was like interesting because I've been doing this for 5 years already.
Yes.
But, so people are now catching on that's one of the tactics that brands are now connecting to people and literally saying, if you're not creating videos, you're not connecting to your audience. So
100%. Totally agree. Paragraph 3 notes that there isn't only more content to consume, Kevin, but also more devices to consume it on, and often simultaneously. I'm definitely a proponent in that statement, where I'm multi-device tasking quite often. An overwhelming majority of media consumers across generations, and look at this, includes almost 66% of baby boomers, now routinely browse the internet or apps while watching TV. New content increasingly is created to drive and cater for shorter attention spans, exactly as you referenced in terms of the 10-second TikTok ad, but with program executives reportedly telling writers that they should assume all viewers will be accessing 2 screens or more at once. Media multitasking is so prevalent both in professional and personal time that Americans now spend, take note, on average, roughly 13 hours a day, Kevin, engaging with media. The reality here is that media multitasking inflates total media consumption time, but often dilutes the quality of that intention, as a person might see or hear multiple things, but really they're only deeply focused on any one thing at one point in time.
I heard an interesting stat yesterday, also referring to the amount of time we spend on engaged in social media, but for Africa. And currently leading for Africa is Kenya, and second is South Africa. And we in South
Wow,
Africa,
Kenya, hey?
we spend up to 9 hours a day on media, social media, which is that is
What
that is a lot
what
of time.
what was Kenya's time value? Do you remember that at all? Was there a big difference?
They didn't mention Kenya because we were in a South African kind of workshop, but they were saying that South Africa is second. So yeah, it's quite interesting to see that we're spending so much time in social media.
So paragraph 4 notes that, unsurprisingly, this explosion in content, platforms, and devices has fragmented consumers' collective focus, making it only more difficult for companies to effectively monetize the public's shifting engagement habits, Kevin. And inflation-adjusted media revenue has remained relatively flat in recent years, as the growth in consumption across social media platforms, video streaming services, etc., and digital hasn't generated levels of consumer spending or profit that are comparable with cable television, legacy print publications, movie theaters, and physical media. So interesting to see that the traditional media still is really a place where brands are getting leverage on their spend and converting into brand usage and consumption. The reality is that while people are consuming more media than ever, especially on digital platforms like ours and social media, streaming platforms, this hasn't translated into the same level of consumer spending or profits that, as I mentioned, the traditional media like television, print, and cinema have delivered.
Great. So can you provide an overview of why people consume media?
Yes, I think we probably should have started with this question because it really sets some key propositions in place, and there are five primary purposes or categories for an interesting statement called the jobs to be done in media consumption. And purpose one is actually to enjoy something that I love. It was lovely to start with this point. And this is about in-person experiences, including live concerts and music festivals, which, as I mentioned, definitely are on the rise again. Theme parks, sporting events, movie theaters, physical books, audiobooks are also consumed primarily for love. There's certain niche streaming services, and yeah, again, picking up on the word niche you referenced. Digital music is also consumed primarily for love, Kevin, but it's a rare medium that's consumed almost as heavily for background ambience. And I know I'm very much in that space. The background ambience, I've got to have my music on. 34% consume for love versus 20% for background ambience, only second to radio. Purpose two is for education and information. And here the primary job to be done is through newspapers, magazines, and podcasts. Physical books, audiobooks, linear cable, and YouTube over-index on this role, Kevin.
Great, but I mean, just listening to that is, for me, it's very specifically about what I love and about education and information. Even if I look at my social media, there are news pieces that I would follow, but it's generally stuff that that I love following rather than just scrolling. I follow what I enjoy scrolling through. For me, it's an education and information kind of specifically. Yeah.
And that love conversation is quite interesting. And just hearing your point of view, I can understand why it is purpose one in these rankings. Purpose three is for social connection. And the primary job of social media sites, as expected, the likes of Facebook, etc., Facebook more so than others, though. Social video, including Instagram, Reels, and TikTok that you mentioned, but not YouTube, live events, and video games over index on this particular role. So Insta and TikTok in the short format definitely over indexing. Purpose four is for light entertainment and relaxation. The primary job of cable television, video streaming, social video, mobile, and console gaming. And within this particular group, video streaming and console gaming are most likely to be frequently consumed for love. Look at the big, percentage of gamers definitely pulling into the love fact there. And finally, Kevin, purpose five is for background ambience. The primary role of radio, digital music, podcasts, and cable television all over indexing in this particular proposition. And I have a repertoire where I come home cooking dinner, doing the chores and things like that. I'll have the television on in the background. I'll have a really good set of headphones on, and I'll be moving around, engaging audio wise, but getting the odd glimpse of the activity on the TV as well. So good combination of cable television and audio engagement there.
Yeah. Craig, so you've referred to the quality of consumer attention. Give us more information about what is that?
Yeah, Kevin, it's covered in quite a bit of detail, and it's a fairly complex question for this sort of the standard practice of segmenting media consumption behavior, which is generally by demographics, by income, and by spend. The attention equation, however, adds another important lens to this, Kevin, and that's the quality of consumers' attention based on the underlying attitudes and beliefs. So it brings a whole lot of emotional construct into the equation as well. And while we've not addressed the point in detail in our discussion today, the methodology really characterizes consumers not by their time spent, as we mentioned, but actually by their commercial value through the value of attention. And this really is where brands need to lean in and understand that if the right content is in place and you are filtering through into this niche personalized engagement, the value equation really is in your favor. There are 7 customer segments that have been identified in this regard. And the first 3 segments actually represent 40% of consumers' attention, Kevin, which is of great value to brands. So let's look at these. So segment 1 is the content lover, identified as entertainment omnivores who are curious and passionate. They spent 2.4 times more money on content and consume 1.7 times more content than the average consumer. And at 40% of segmentation, that's good value for brands. So they're classified as super fans watching movie franchises and spin-off shows. They ride theme roller coasters and they buy all the items advertised every step of the way. That's where brands really want to be playing. Segment 2 is interactivity enthusiasts, and they identified as competitive and lively immersion seekers who love video games, sports, and online betting. Yeah, big challenge around that. And they do like comedy as well. They prefer endorsements to advertising, and they over-index on the preference for user-generated content. Although they're identified as sort of eager consumers, they definitely find modern media landscape very confusing, difficult to navigate, and they believe it's overly expensive to engage in this world. Segment 3 is community trendsetters, and I like this segment. They're identified as the culture creators, Kevin. They are extrovert tastemakers and they seek out large communal events such as concerts, movies, and theme parks. They're definitely active on social media and they're very much driving online culture and fandom, often with overspending on hobbies and interests. They enjoy advertisements more than any other segment, and when not setting cultural conversation, they're shopping. And I think this really is when the online brands in the online space get this right, they really have a great value drive for this particular segment.
Yeah, and it's interesting that we've already got a segmentation for this, Greg.
Absolutely. Kevin, the remaining segments represent the balance, the 60% of consumers, and they clustered into groups with much lower attention and lower intrinsic values to brands. The segment 4 is content lover. They're identified as entertainment omnivores in this instance, and they're curious and passionate. Segment 5 is digital traditionalists. They're defined as tech-savvy legacy viewers who are older than members of other segments and open-minded, probably talking about me. They enjoy new forms of distribution, but they prefer professionally produced content over user-generated content. Well, in fact, very much that's the spectrum I'm in. And they love staying on trend and are deeply connected to their favorite brands. Segment 6, legacy holdouts. Interesting segment profile here. They're traditional media loyalists who are older than members of any other segment, and they're very wary of digital media. They represent the plurality of consumers who prefer traditional media, such as cable TV, books, and newspapers, probably our parents' generation, and they find streaming services overwhelming, costly, intrusive, and consider news essential.
Yeah, Craig, I'm just looking at this where I tend to kind of go. I do the traditionalist as well. But I also use a lot of content for just educational purposes and to see what's new, what's happening, what's out there. So there's a combination, I think, of all of these.
Yeah, but very much so. I'm the digital traditionalist in the space. Segment 7 is mobile scrollers, and they're digitally savvy, cost conscious, looking out for free content, and they use their phones for a variety of activities and enjoy the endless scroll, constantly whizzing through content, not because they're searching, but because that's how they prefer to consume their digital content. They very much for premium content, they opt for streaming services with larger libraries where you are putting dollars on the table to access content. And finally, here, segment 8 is the thrifty thinker. They're inquisitive and risk-averse and value-conscious knowledge seekers. Here's the critical component. They love mentally stimulating mediums such as online games and puzzles, as long as they're not being tracked. And they're also cautious spenders and will splurge on cultural events, for instance, Oscar contending films and theatrical plays, Kevin. And that's the wrap on the depth and breadth of segmentation around media consumption and how to hold consumers' attention.
Well, Craig, but as you were speaking through all of this now, and where we started around the tension equation,
Yes.
what's fascinating, I always put my human behavior kind of lens on how we as humans are consuming information or how we're behaving around this type of stuff. And so it's going to be really interesting to see what happens in 10 years from now, because it is niching down to such a degree. And as you were speaking, I was thinking, what is the brand that is going to be showcasing a television program and then having, the inside scoop on your device available? Who's going to do that kind of double screen? Because people double screen, multiscreen all the time. So you're going to have additional versions of something happening while you're consuming. What is that next thing that people are going to be doing? But if you see it like in this context, the segmentation, what people's preferences are, and if people purposefully use this to target a brand or target their segment, there's ways to do that, to get them to multi-screen about one thing.
Absolutely, Kevin. And I know a good while ago, in fact, it's worth revisiting to see how prevalent it is. But we did mention the fact that, shows would record 3 or 4 different endings or changes in the direction of where the show was going, where as people are watching, they are voting and giving thoughts of the direction the show could be going. And based on that, they would aggregate the intention of that audience and find the next chapter or the end direction based on that. And they'd then bring that particular pre-recorded piece into the mix and, shift the direction. So shows weren't completed end to end. They were completed with variable opportunities to take you in a different direction. And I love that.
Yeah,
Expensive to produce, really, really is, but just phenomenal to be able to have viewers and consumers giving you some direction as to where they'd like to see this thing go and what the expectations are.
Yeah, just getting your audience involved to that degree, that's next level. Right. The quote for today, Craig, is attention is the rarest and purest form of generosity. And I think that's a beautiful quote. Simone Weil.
But there's almost a sort of paradox to that, because, when brands are applying the reality to that, the generosity is not in place. It's the commercial value that they're driving at the end of the day.
Yeah, exactly. And yet, that's what we're all gunning. That's what every brand's gunning for, is the attention.
Yeah.
So we should be more careful, I suppose, on what.
It'll be interesting to see how the generosity concept comes into that particular proposition.
Yeah, exactly. Fantastic, Greg. Thank you for the insights, attention equation, and guys, please join us every Wednesday and Thursday. And for myself and Craig, have a fantastic week. Craig, thank you for the insights, and I will see you next week.
Thank you, Kevin. Have a good rest of the week and weekend ahead.
You too. Cheers for now. Bye.